Hello, everyone. Today is June 16th, 2021. This is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group meeting. So today we have a presentation on how to back up data services outside the cluster by Tom. And then we will just do an update on the data protection white paper. If anyone has anything else you want to talk about, please feel free to add that to the agenda doc. Tom, I think I made you a co-host. Let me actually stop sharing so you can share.
Yeah, great, thanks. So can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. So we got a few questions on how to do data protection for managed services. And so I put together a few slides just to kind of spark a discussion here. This is the approach that we kind of take, but I think it's possible to have different approaches as well. So I first wanted to kind of compare it to how you can do volume backups. And I think Ben's talked about this a little bit, but it's possible even with just CSI to take backups of volumes, because you can do a CSI snap and a CSI restore and then extract data from that restored volume. So this works even in cases where your snapshots on your storage system are not that persistent and you can't rely on them for a backup. Alternatively, you might be able to extract data directly through APIs from the provider. So there are data path APIs in some providers that let you extract data directly to your backup repositories. And finally, the last approach that I think is kind of a good default is to consider snapshots durable. So in a lot of cloud providers, you can imagine AWS EDS, for example, a storage snapshot, a block snapshot is actually pretty durable. It's stored in S3. And if you want to change your failure domains, you can even copy that snapshot between different providers. Does this make sense? Because I think I'm going to make a parallel of this to data services as well.
So to clarify approach number 3, you mean don't change the existing API, just implement it differently in such a way that when you take a snapshot, you get something more durable than a local copy.
Yeah, so if you use AWS's EBS snapshot API, the snapshots are more durable than other types of systems. They actually end up getting exported to S3 automatically under the covers. And you maybe don't go through CSI or any type of Kubernetes API to take those snapshots. And if you do that, you can actually control the snapshot completely through the APIs.
I was gonna.
You can actually take a CSS snapshot, and then that will be durable for AWS as well, right? So why you're saying you don't have to go through CSS? I'm not that part.
That's something we've prototyped, where you actually use the Kubernetes snapshot API, but you establish variables in the snapshot class that say this snapshot should go to a safe place, such that it could be used as a backup and not just a local copy.
Right.
And then you can leverage all of the existing API stuff and get something that resembles a backup. Just you don't have a lot of levers to control it other than the snapshot class.
That's a great point. I think you're absolutely right. The implementation that we use here does use, if you go provider specific, we kind of do provider for everything.
You're actually using provider. So you're basically using the SUDI vendors API directly rather than using CSI. Okay, I see.
That's right. Yeah. But if we have
but actually that's not, but I mean, it's actually not necessary. I'm just saying that you can actually go through CSI route and achieve the same result. Yeah, for the durable. If they support the CSI driver support.
I don't think the issue is the API. Whether you use CSI or provider or some cloud specific API, what really matters is the implementation. On the storage backend side.
Right, but
well, I think what Tom's trying to point out here is that there's basically a fundamental disconnect between on-prem vendors and the cloud. And the cloud vendors went ahead and implemented durable snapshots under the covers behind their snapshot APIs. So like, for example, in Valero came out of the cloud originally. It expects that these snapshots are durable. And Xing and I went through all kinds of backflips in order to make this work on vSphere. So I think that's the thing to take away, is that the cloud gives you this already. We're starting to see this come into some of the on-prem stuff, but those durable snapshots are really a viable way to do things.
But I feel like there's almost a fourth case that's a blend between 1 and 3 here that is significantly different enough from 3 that it is worth spelling out, which is it is a CSI snapshot, it is a CSI restore, but instead of extracting the data from the volume, the snapshot itself is just durable.
Right. I thought
that's exactly what.
I thought that's what number 3 is.
VBS
Is that not number 3? Not what that mean? Okay. Yeah. Maybe you need to add like a yeah, maybe 3A or CB or something, or even 4. Yeah. So maybe you still keep your original provider snapshot that does not involve CSI, and then the second case is actually basic CSI driver just handles everything. Or when you take a CSI snapshot, it automatically does the upload. I mean, you don't care which layer does the upload, right? It's as long as I use this volume snapshot API, I get a durable snapshot. So
I guess the point that Ben and I want to make is we have 2 different types of snapshots. One that is, I'm also, the term durable is also a little, vague. I think we have 2 types of snapshots. One where it's in a different fault domain than the volume versus not, right?
Right.
And
mm-hmm.
So for
I think
example,
durable snapshots actually it's a backup actually. So basically,
right.
when you take snapshot, it becomes a backup already.
Yeah, but without defining what snapshot and backup mean, that distinction is meaningless. So I think Ardalan's trying to spell out the differences.
You probably want to add a clear definition. What do you mean by?
So basically,
if
it's
Tom, this was like introduction stuff for Tom's point.
Local snapshot versus a remote snapshot or durable snapshot. Well, but I think most people on this call probably knows this anyway, because if you know the CSI spec, we all know that actually supports 2 types of snapshot.
But the problem is that the poor Kubernetes user who's trying to consume this, he doesn't know the difference, right? Because Kubernetes hides it from you.
And the way we're talking about it is as if CSI snapshots are inferior to durable snapshots, approach 3. But the way this is phrased right now is like one is more better than the other one, which is not the case.
Yeah,
which is not the case.
Yep.
I think that should be, we should not be doing that.
So also this is also a use case thing. Like you take regular snapshots which are stored in the storage system, and you use it if you have to revert, or you have to basically, you corrupted your database somewhere, you want to revert, and a snapshot that gets copied out to object storage somewhere, which is how the cloud providers do that. You use when you have to restore from a failure because your local storage system is done. So they have 2 different sets of use cases. So we shouldn't just kind of say durable and non-durable, right?
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
I think Tom, I think now see the the confusion and the problem people are having. So I think most people knows the differences, but then when you are comparing this, it looks like the cloud provider snapshots are better. That's not what we want to say. And that's definitely, I don't think that is the intention of the CSI spec when we introduced it, when we added that list snapshots to make people, so make sure that when you're taking a snapshot that's actually get uploaded, you have to wait for that to be uploaded. But I mean, maybe, so the approach should not be approach 1 CSI, right? Actually, CSI can be either a local snapshot or a remote snapshot. So this is weird when we are named that like this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So yeah, there are tons of points here.
It's not different approaches. Like you're basically talking about different storage systems now. It's not like you're comparing different approach, right? Approach is always you take either you take a Kubernetes volume snapshot API, or you're using vendors, whatever you say, you call it provider API, right? So like under CSI, okay, maybe I think approach 1, CSI snapshot, you should have like 2. One is in case you're doing local, then you have, then you actually have three ways or something like that, right? Either if it's local, then you have to do this 2-step, or if it's local, you can also, yeah, you have to do that 2-step, but also you can actually do this one inside your CSI driver, you can do upload or something like that. So I think approach 1 should include like 2 or 3 sub cases, something like that. And then number 2 is provider only. Yeah, instead of like so many approaches, maybe just like 2 big categories, CSI or provider. And then under each you have sub cases. So whether you support local only
I think this is interesting, but I really want to see where Tom's going. Maybe we can
right,
table this
okay.
and
So
people
let's
can
not
like beat up Tom's slides on Slack or something.
Sure. I think, yeah, that's actually not the, yeah, this is actually not the goal of this, because I would assume most people knows about all of this already. Maybe not everybody, but most people should know of the difference already. So maybe Tom, maybe you can update this later. We can actually add comments to your slide deck afterwards on how to make this more clear. But then, yeah, why don't you move forward, because we want to know.
Yeah, it sounds like this is a good topic for a future meeting, is snapshots, durability, and how do we start referring to them? Because we've been calling them durable. I don't know where that started from. I know we started inside VMware. And
Yeah.
if there's alternate terms, we can certainly discuss those.
Okay,
But-
yeah, maybe, okay, maybe we should, yeah, maybe we could do that. Yeah, maybe, so Shanqian, let's talk about this.
But this,
Actually,
this existing slide edit looks good.
yeah, let's move on.
Here. So it's Tom sharing their experiences, right? It's nothing
Uh-huh.
about what.
Yeah, so
I'm not
maybe
trying to
let's
prescribe
actually
anything here.
move forward with the, you know, the core of what you're trying to explain. I mean, rather than
Yeah, definitely.
comparing. Yeah, I know, I get it. I think it's almost like we're talking about who's the snapshot mechanism is better. That's not what we want to focus on.
Yeah, and I think for nomenclature, when I say backups, I'm talking about what you do with local snapshots and not local snapshots only. Although there are obviously very valid use cases for local snapshots only as well, because people pointed out. But yeah, I love this conversation. I think everyone had some really good points. But maybe I'll move on. We can beat up my next slides as well in more depth.
Tom, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
This is not we got into mechanism, but under what cases you would rather call provider provided snapshot interfaces instead of using CSI snapshot? Is that because the CSI snapshot do not have sufficient flexibility for you to be able to create remote snapshots in cloud systems?
Yes. So the most common requirement I know Google Persistent Disk actually doesn't have this problem because most of their disks are not region, they're global. But in AWS, the snapshots are actually tied to a region because they're an S3, which is an S3 bucket in a region. Although I think they might have released some global snapshots as well. But so a common use case for us is actually taking a snapshot of an EBS volume and then copying that to a different region for extra durability.
Okay.
Oh, even for that, okay, that I actually did not
And the
realize.
CSI snapshot is not capable of doing that. I thought you can achieve that by passing in opaque parameters into the driver.
I don't have experience with that, but
I think we're going back to the
yeah.
original
No.
conversation again.
It's not.
But you know, like basically with the
Potentially,
CSI
maybe-
snapshot, you know, you can also back it up to, let's say, multi-regional buckets, and then you get all the benefits of what Tom is talking about here. So there's, again, the way this is phrased is like, you know, one is inferior to the other, which is not the case. It's not a limitation of a CSI API. It's not a limitation of, you know.
No. We want to understand that because I do know that the CSI does have some limitations, which doesn't cover rich functionalities in cloud provided interfaces, right?
So from
get
the
a-
Valero point of view, right, we started a lot of this stuff before the CSI snapshots were available. So we have cloud provider specific plugins that we're looking to move towards CSI. And then like we have the on-prem cases where we need to be able to take a local snapshot, but then we need to be able to move the data someplace else. And that's not really available via CSI yet. So I've been kind of dragging my feet on moving us completely to CSI.
That's exactly my point, right? That what I'm saying here is that do we need to enrich our CSI interface
So
Maybe
back to the
it's-
comment that
That's
Ben
actually,
was making, like we have already enabled this through the existing CSI APIs. We
right,
can
so you could do that through the storage snapshot class. Right?
exactly. You
Passing
can
a-
use snapshot
yeah,
class.
you can passing a bucket or something.
But we
But
should
do we need
schedule.
to? But
we
should
should
we
sched-
actually add something to make this like a common, to make a like first class parameter there? Is that a good idea? I feel like we're actually going to this other route. Maybe we need a different discussion.
Let's schedule a future meeting to talk about enhancements to the Snapshot API and
sure,
table all of that stuff for that
yeah,
meeting.
yeah. Let's do that. Actually, I think looks like there are a lot of interest in that. So maybe we should have a separate discussion on that. And then Xiangqian, we should sync up on that before we talk about that.
Sounds good.
All right, let's
Yeah,
move to the next slide.
No, I definitely love that because I think we're in the same boat as Valero, where we have some legacy implementations that maybe could be updated to use CSI. But I'm not sure all providers support what we need. So we have to kind of dig to the second level of detail there.
Okay.
So for data services, you actually have this pretty similar problem. And so I want to frame kind of the primitives that we have. Obviously, the ability to take snapshots through APIs in the provider, which can be similar to the provider snapshots that I talked about for volumes. And these APIs are kind of across all the different cloud providers. You may or may not have them if you have kind of managed services on-prem. So if you're using, if you have kind of a team running these things, you may or may not have snapshots, and they may have different levels of consistency as well. But something that most of these data services have in common is logical snapshots. So you can always take a logical dump of a database. And the model that we use, which isn't obviously the only model, is that you have a reference to the data service inside your cluster. So when I go back up, for example, a namespace, maybe I have config maps and secrets that tell me how to use that data service and how to connect to it. And this is actually a pattern you see not just for data protection, but you see this even for normal application development. You can imagine I want to consume just a database at all. And the way I can do that is by writing a config map and a secret that have the connection information that I need to connect to it. And the thing you need for data protection looks very similar, right? You just need essentially a connection, and you can do logical dumps through that connection layer. Does this make sense?
So basically here, what you mean by data service is something outside of volume, outside of CSI, right?
Yeah, so something outside the cluster. And this is pretty common in cloud providers where you have things like managed databases, but we're actually seeing this in on-prem customers with on-prem.
Right, so if I guess any on-prem databases would be similar, right? Like if you have like a on-prem MySQL or whatever, Redis, if you want to take a snapshot, you probably need a similar mechanism.
Exactly, yeah. This is just an example with Postgres, but you can apply it to many different things, right? We mostly see customers using this in cloud, but we have had a request for on-prem as well.
For the in cloud, have you played with or looked around at what Amazon's doing with the ACK? Is that something you guys think is interesting, or is it too much of a one-off for them, or what's your perspective there?
I haven't played with that. Is that related to their backup manager?
No. This is sort of their attempt to try to just connect in things like RDS into the cluster, so that theoretically inside the cluster you could allocate external resources and whatnot. It's still super early, but they've been talking about it for the last couple of months.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't seen that. That is very interesting, because really all you need is the connection information from in the cluster. And then if you back up that namespace or whatever, the idea is that you can use that connection information to grab the backup of the thing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure they've gotten APIs yet that allow the backup or the snapshot stuff to happen. They've been trying to do more provisioning and whatnot, but it's an interesting path. But yeah, I think we're the only, at least the way they act, we're the only ones that have been talking to them about why isn't backup in there. So I was maybe hoping to get some other people to sort of make that feature request, see if we can get them to expand it.
Yeah, that's great. Let me, I'll take a note to reach out to them, because that is very interesting, certainly.
Steve, can you also add a note in the agenda doc, whatever you were?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And so combining these two things, you can actually kind of get a similar set of approaches that we talked about earlier. maybe it's only 3 instead of 4, or maybe I'm missing a few here as well. But for any managed database, you can imagine just taking a logical dump. So you can always, with connection information, go and do essentially a MySQL dump or a Postgres dump, Mongo dump, etc. The downside, of course, is there's a few. Big ones, performance. Usually these dump tools use, for example, consistent reads, which actually has a big impact on the database, right? If you're tracking all the changes, if the database itself is tracking all the changes for long-running transactions, it can have a really big impact on performance. And so something that we've gotten several requests for is actually to integrate both logical dumps and provider snapshots, because many of these, RDS, for example, has direct snapshots you can take, and combine the two approaches. So you can imagine doing something similar like that I talked about doing for volumes, which is you take a provider snapshot. In this case, it would be an RDS snapshot. You restore that database, and you have essentially a temporary copy of that, and then you can do a logical dump from that connection. So you can not only the benefit of making it logical is that not only can you restore it in RDS or the same service, but it should be kind of portable. You should be able to instantiate a new instance of MySQL or Postgres in your cluster or in a different provider or in a different cluster, and restore that logical dump into that database. And again, just like with volumes, you can actually, I should probably change this, maybe we'll make this cloud. You can do something similar with volumes where you can take just snapshots and then use APIs inside the provider to manage it. So you can copy it between different regions. You can, kind of change the failure domains with that. And those are really kind of the main ways that we integrate with these managed services. I think it's not, I wouldn't say it's a huge percentage of kind of what we do. Most of the things we back up usually are in Kubernetes, but we definitely do see some use cases for managed services here. Do these approaches make sense?
Comment on the service, the application backup in general is that's one of the things that we lack. It seems to be the relationship between component of the services. For example, when we have an application that uses multiple parts, and in backup, I think it might be okay. But when we go to the restore, time that if this component is not up, the other one will not be even functional. So when we restore, we have to restore them in a specific order for the whole service to be functional. So, and that is, I haven't seen this really captured in this document or in many of the restore service that we showed here, is because without those functioning, then, for example, one component can go up and it doesn't see the other components on up, and it will time out and it will shut down that component. Of course, there are many ways to get around with it, but that just show the importance of dependency between these components of a service of an application when we do the restore. That is my 2 cents on this.
I think you're absolutely right. I would say that's a general problem, though, not specific to managed services. The easy answer is what we do is essentially we treat this connection configuration as the object that we want to back up, because that's what we have the reference to in Kubernetes. And so if you have an ordering constraint, then you have to include that constraint when you restore these. So if I go, the workflow is essentially that I go and restore objects in Kubernetes in some order with dependencies between them. In this case, I would restore, it would be like I'm restoring these things, but really what I'm restoring is both the configuration as well as whatever hooks I need to go and restore the managed services.
Yeah, I think there's also kind of the in-between case, which is the operator-driven applications running in the cluster, but the operator is responsible for standing things up, and even has like the Zalando Postgres operator I've been messing with, and they've got backup in there that's based on, I think, WAL, the Red-Hat log shipping, among other things.
Yeah, that's more complex even than this, because you first kind of have to restore the operator, and well, this is one approach. You first restore the operator, then you restore the instances. But in that case, you're also having to deal with replication with WAL. So you have to go and figure out how you want to apply them, which means you probably need some kind of custom scripting and hooks to do that.
Well, actually, the operator has a backup and a restore command.
Oh, great.
So you can tell it restore snapshot X. So it's kind of in between the two, right? But it's using in-cluster resources. So like there's persistent volumes in there that you probably shouldn't snap and back up.
Yeah, that's great. That is a good example use case, actually. Yeah. Okay, cool. This slide was a lot less controversial than this one. So, feel free to.
The part that is not clear to me is that, look, is the goal to come up with a generic mechanism for these managed services? Or is it to just formalize, what needs to be, like, what's the goal here with this?
The goal here is for Tom is volunteer to share the experience of doing this.
I see.
Of how externally hosted applications like Cloud SQL or Redis in AWS, this kind of applications protected within the Kubernetes context. It's not really to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
so this is basically how
question.
Chasten does it today, and we want to know whether we can generalize and formalize this process or not, right? We haven't
well, so
gone
we
that far yet.
basically-
It's just learning what Chasten has done so far.
Yeah, so we basically got a question during our session at KubeCon. So Xiangqian, I actually got this question. And then I think do we have I'm not sure if the person who brought this up is on this call today.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi. Yeah, maybe you want to, maybe you want to talk about what was your original ask so that everybody is clear. Thanks.
The question was about making a consistent backup of an application and while using services from cloud providers, such as managed databases and other things. So this is exactly the problem we're having.
Okay. Does this help, this presentation? Does this help?
So the part that is a little vague to me is that, whether we're talking about different cloud services or whether we're talking about different databases, each one is done differently. There are different steps involved. There are different ordering of things. And, whether we want to formalize what needs to be done, like, is that the goal, I guess? Because I imagine, like, for example, Amazon may do things one way, Google may do things a different way, or, if you have MySQL on-prem versus Postgres, things are done differently. And, whether it's our job to provide a common layer so things are done unified, uniformly across different, services or across different databases, or whether it's really the job of the operator for those applications or those services to do the right thing based on what needs to be involved. I guess that's the part that is unclear to me. Whether we want to come up with a unified API or whether we want to just leave it to the operators to do the right thing.
So the trick that I've been seeing is that when you have like one service, it's not a problem. You go into like RDS, you say back this up every day, and that's the only service that your cluster uses, fine, not a problem. But you start proliferating services and you start proliferating clusters using services and using instances. And now you've got this big management problem of, is my stuff being backed up? Is it being scheduled properly? Did I stood up a new cluster. Did I go to RDS and set up a schedule to back up the database there? So that's something where, like, from the Valero side, and I think the Kasten side as well, we're really looking at being the orchestrator of a lot of stuff. And sometimes, like, in these cases, even like CSI snapshots where EBS is really doing the data movement, or these RDS snapshots are very analogous. We're not really a backup utility because we don't actually like copy the data, but we are orchestrating the overall backup. So the discovery of the services that are being used is kind of the trick here. And I'm kind of curious, Tom, how you, like these config maps, these are semi-custom, right? So is it up to the user to, tell Kasten or Canister about these, or do you have a mechanism for figuring these out?
We don't have a discovery mechanism for these. We do ask the customer to do it. You could actually script it though, but I think the issue is that you end up with way more services than you want to back up with a specific cluster. If I can go and query AWS for all the RDS instances that I can see in some security group, and then I could generate the config map and connection information. But then the downside is that most of those services probably aren't being used from inside this cluster. And my kind of hope is that, in fact, if they're using even applications that would connect to those databases, they would actually use Kubernetes objects to represent that configuration anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's all customer driven. We don't have a discovery mechanism.
Yeah, I think from our side, we've got Tanzu, which also has Tanzu Data Services. And that covers, we have like Greenplum, which is distributed Postgres. We have a Postgres operator, a few other things. We're looking at how to get those services when they're in use via Kubernetes to be exposed out so we can handle them with data protection. And yeah, so we're kind of in the early stages of some of that work.
Yeah, that's great. There's a project from Apps Code that actually was pretty cool that put all this stuff in a CRD. And the idea was that if that was standardized, you could kind of build tools on top of it. I didn't see it gain too much traction, but I really liked the idea. If we're going to propose a standard, actually, this might be a good thing to kind of get this group on board around. But for now, I think, if you can use config maps as secrets, that's kind of our prescribed approach right now.
Yeah, certainly it's a available approach. Personally, I'm really pushing it. I really want to push towards operator-driven stuff for this. I mean, you can easily see an operator living in front of RDS, even where you can create a resource like RDS database. The operator goes and talks to RDS and sets it up, and that we get a lot of these details of how do I back up and restore this object gets pushed inside the object itself into the operator, if you will.
Have you seen Crossplane? Have you dug into that at all?
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember it.
It's from Upbound. It's kind of some of the people who worked on Rook actually, formed a new company, Upbound, to work on it. I think they're trying to do that essentially. They kind of integrate with like Terraform, and you can essentially provision resources based on CRs that you create.
Yeah, so if we can get them to, for example, put in paths where we can trigger their snapshot mechanisms, then we don't have to run around behind them and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
I think that's ideal, basically, for these backup orchestrators, the way Kasten or Valero want to be. If the API for them is the operator, and we just offload all the complexities, all the application-specific logic to the operator itself, that would be the best way to have something close to a standard generic API that can handle multiple services.
One of the things here is that there are just too many application types, right? But defining one API type to cover all, it's very challenging.
Definitely.
In this case, it's a Postgres, a database, right? What Tom is showing right now. For example, I don't know, other cache cases or Redis cases or Cassandra cases, they might need a completely different set of input. Generalizing those input is not straightforward.
Sure, but the nice thing about what we're discussing now is that all of that gets handled by the operator. You're not exposed to it. As far as like Valero is concerned, Kasten is concerned, you just define a schedule. You just say take snapshot, and then whatever information they need, whether it's config map, CR, or secret, whatever, that's taken care of by the operator.
Yes, and so that we're not like trying to figure out how to take a snapshot. The operator should already have all this. It's got a resource that told it what it set up. It should have any secrets, config maps, etc. in there. Like, for example, talking to the service, or even which pods are involved with this, which persistent disks are involved with this, and really push that complexity behind it. Because I think everything, well, almost everything can be boiled down to like a snapshot type thing, a point in time. We want to restore to this point in time, and pretty much if you can't, you probably can't back it up.
If it's in the operator layer, this sounds like a great idea. What is the mechanism of notifying the operator? Because is
so
yeah.
the working plan I've been doing is to basically have snapshot CRDs that are analogous to the volume snapshot, the CSI ones. but probably a little slimmed down. And so you can find a resource, for example, like the Postgres operator exposes Postgres CRs, and you should be able to write a snapshot resource that references the CR, and then the operator picks it up and does the internals.
Yeah, for the is this a pattern right now for using operators to manage cloud resources like this, or externally manage the resources like this, or more often people just use the database directly?
Well, they're probably doing this directly, but that's really puts you into the position of like hand building each cluster.
Right, that's what I'm afraid, because
Well, but you know, it's like, stop doing that.
Yeah, it's in order to support those that needs the existing workload to basically change the way of managing things a lot.
Well, like you know, like Tom and Caston, they've got a solution right now where they say, hey, if you use this external service, go ahead and write a script and read your config map that you wrote, and go ahead and use and trigger that external stuff. So it essentially, I mean, if you step back a little bit, that's really very much this snapshot pattern, except that it was built by the customer as a one-off for each installation, because each installation is unique.
Yeah, there's some commonality, obviously. Like for RDS, taking a snapshot on RDS actually has relatively few parameters. A lot of the parameters that we need are actually, if you want to also take a logical dump, for example, you need the connection information to the specific database. So hopefully, you know, my hope is that you can kind of get this. You don't have to do the cross product of everything. You can implement the logical part and then implement, you know, the interaction with just RDS or the, you know, Cloud SQL or the other Azure, you know, SQL Server and all that.
Is the idea here that it looks something, the snapshot light instance or CR looks something like an ingress resource or a gateway resource where like different people can implement their own things and using like, so you can have more than one of these ideas in the cluster? Like, is that what you're, like, are you proposing a shared API?
A common API, but different implementations. So that we should be able to find a resource that says snapshot resource type X. So like Postgres database resources have an associated snapshot CR. And the implementation of the snapshot CR is not done in a common place necessarily, but like the Postgres operator should be exposing that API or responding to those resources, but in the way that we tell it, so that, you know, we don't have to rewrite for each individual operator. Like right now, the Zalando Postgres operator has got APIs for backing up and restoring, but they're unique to the Postgres operator. So I'll have to write a plugin for Valero that knows how to talk to Zalando, and then the next one and the next one and the next one. And I'd rather, and the other option is to get all the vendors to write a plugin for Valero, but then that leaves Caston out, because you know, you can't use our plugins. So I want to try and drive us towards a standard, or at least a concept where there's a relatively simple volume snapshot CR that's there. There's a discovery mechanism, and then we can share that with Caston and everybody else to drive these operator driven and, you know, external service type things without having to write N plugins. You know, either the backup companies write N plugins, or the database developers write N plugins, and that, you know, that seems like madness.
Hey, Dave, I think one challenging, I think, with this approach is how do you define this common snapshot CRD? What is in the spec? What is in the status? Because we are backing up different things, right?
Yeah, but I don't know that they're really that different, are they?
I mean,
Well, I
normally,
think,
I'm just saying normally, right? Let's say if you just look at volume snapshot, right? You have spec and you have status, there are objects that you want to observe, like what's the status of those. But if it's just like a general one for all, what will be returned? Like how are you watching that?
mean,
How do you know? How do you know that it's a success or it's not success? How
I mean,
how do you measure?
actually,
it? I guess that's
we
the-
should be able to define that. I mean, the differences are not that big. You know, backing up a database, it's going to take some time to actually move the data, make a consistent snapshot, and then there may be an upload phase. I mean, from my perspective, you know, looking
so
back, everything wound up on tape. So if you can't reduce it to a string of bits, you probably can't back it up.
I was just wondering, like, for example, you could have different resources there, or you're saying just kind of just save them. And like,
Just to be more specific, Dave, are you, let's say, you know, obviously, you know, for different databases, we're going to have different CRDs. You know, for example, let's say one for Postgres snapshot, one for, let's say, MySQL. So these are different CRDs. So there's no way we can come up with the same CRD for both, unless, you know, we just call it something generic, which kind of has the problems that
I would expect that we would have a
Right.
Postgres volume snapshot, CRD. There would be a MySQL snapshot, CRD.
So
But
then
there's-
basically the goal of unification is for all the MySQL operators or for all the Postgres operators to adopt this CRD.
And also that the CRD basically, even though it, so we have like volume snapshot CRD right now. And the Postgres snapshot CRD should look a lot like the volume snapshot CRD. The MySQL CRD should pretty much be identical to the Postgres CRD. Maybe there's room for extra parameters, but we should be able to
Where do you
discover.
get it? Where do you get information about like where to back up to? Like if I take one of these Postgres snapshots, it has to shove the bits into some data store. How do you specify where that is?
So we can do things like a volume snapshot, like a snapshot class with free form stuff in there, right? Because obviously at some point, this winds up being fairly, I don't know. At some point, there's definitely application specific stuff. The model I have defined right now, like we're using this inside the vSphere plugin, we can snapshot something and then it exposes out a data stream with the snapshot. And we can copy that someplace else or we can leave it sitting there. But,
Yeah, but
everything
the magic
to,
of volume snapshots is that like it's up to the CSI plugin to figure out where to shove the bits, and then when you come ask to get them back, it's up to the plugin to give them back to you.
That's only a partial solution. So if you're looking at this from the, hey, I build a disk array and I want to provide this capability to my customer, that's great. If you're looking at this from the point of view, let me finish, please. Let me finish, please. If you're looking at this from the point of view of a backup provider, even if your snapshots are durable, customers are going to say things like, hey, I want you to actually copy that over to the Veritas vault and put it into the disk array. And so even with CSI volume snapshots, I need this data extraction API to get stuff. You know, people want to back up into multiple locations, and that's not necessarily all configured in the storage provider.
Right. So where I was going with this is that CSI sort of hides this problem from you, but it needs to be solved where at the end of the day, people want control over where their data goes. And CSI basically doesn't give you a choice, but you're saying you do want the choice. And so, but that has to be specified in an object somewhere. And I would hate to see it specified differently for every single kind of object. You know, you kind of want a common way to do this where you're like, this is the place where all my backups are going to go. And if you have 3 different apps, they can use the same information to decide to shove the 3 different backups into that place. So they don't have to specify it 3 times.
That's not the issue then here. As you know, Dave mentioned, like we can have a similar construct, just like snapshot class for these application level databases, you know, to capture that information. And we are doing the same thing. NetApp is doing the same thing. You know, but we can talk about it offline, but we are doing the same thing outside of the CSI mechanism where you can specify how to back up a volume to an object store and without even invoking CSI APIs, by just dealing with CRs. So we're already doing this today. The issue,
yeah, but we're doing it in a proprietary way. Like I think
right.
what we're trying to develop is a more open way to say, you know, for someone who knows how to generate backups, you know, and I need a place to shove them that I can, in principle, expect to exist anywhere. Right? That's the beauty of this design, is that it doesn't depend on any particular underlying technology. It just says, I know it's a Postgres database. I want to back it up. You know, I need to be able to say where to back it up, and then, you know, if there's a better way to, and then my follow-on is, you know, if there's a better way, you'd like to expose that better way in addition to sort of the default. But having a default that just works everywhere is phenomenal.
And we'll see that some things may not expose it so that we can get access to the data. Like take a look at like EBS snapshots. Prior to, I think, last year, there was no way to access the data in an EBS snapshot except by cloning the volume and attaching it to something. And that's true for like RDS snapshots. You can't get into the RDS. So like in the middle of a RDS Postgres, you can create a snapshot, you can create a new database for a snapshot, but you can't like reach inside and suck the data out of the snapshot directly.
I see someone raise his hands. Someone want to?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to jump in, but I didn't want to like talk over anybody. So the only question that I wanted to bring up was, it seems like there's two problems. There's like the problem of like, where does the data go to, and this stuff from the CSI, and we want to like give options for that. But then there's the second problem that seems to be like, there are some application specific things that need to happen for a given backup. Are there two problems that we're trying to, are we talking about two problems and conflating them into one right now, or am I misunderstanding what's going on?
I think you're right. You know, Xin and I, we went through this discussion for multiple times. Unlike what Dave was mentioning, using the operator way, the thought was using application constructs, and that actually was kind of in the original thoughts of defining applications. Because if you really think about whether it's externally managed databases or in a stateful workload deployed directly in the cluster, if there's a way we can group the resources and the different ways of taking a snapshot of those applications within the application construct, then all these problems should be solved. You just need specific controllers to understand those application CRs and being able to take action on that.
That's exactly the opposite.
And those are the operators, exactly. And those are the operators.
Yeah.
The question is whether, you know, we want to standardize the CRs that are used by the operators, whether it's
Sure.
called.
Sure. The reason why we didn't go too much on that in the beginning is the variety of the applications makes the application CR definition pretty hard, right? That's one. With regarding to the destination, the backup target, I think there's also a discussion, right? One is the COSI or something like that, is to define, my thoughts was to define a target within the Kubernetes construct, right? This target could well be a file mounting, could well be a object storage or something like that. And that target, or even I don't know, maybe a multi-region bucket in the cloud, right? In this case, or when we do a backup orchestration, or when backup orchestration system comes in, they can refer to that destination as a single point of truth. Everything just goes there in the ideal world, but in reality, it's really challenging, especially with this operating model.
Yeah, are you thinking of having data path?
It's fine. I already have a plan. So,
Say it again, please.
What is that?
Oh, Sean, are you thinking of having data paths?
Right. Okay. Let me talk after this. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sean, are you thinking of having data path APIs in that model?
Well, it depends on which, right? If it's a cloud hosting services, unlikely you will not be on the data path, right? Because the snapshot will be taken care of by the cloud providers or external stateful workload providers, whatever it is. But if it is a construct sitting within the Kubernetes, yes, then you might be on the data path, but not the orchestrator could well be the application operator, as Dale was mentioning.
Yeah, so the APIs themselves would not expose data path primitives, but they would, the implementations themselves would handle data path, is what you're saying.
Sure, but what we needed from them is the ability to accept location. Ask them to, hey, I don't want to be on the data path, but you go ahead and dump data there. This kind of thing, right?
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
I want both, because no, seriously, because there should be a fallback position where it's the same as with like the existing CSI design. The fallback position to get the data out of the snapshot is clone, attach, extract. And it's slow potentially, but it should always work. So that's like your fallback position.
Hey, I think we only have a couple minutes left. I think this is a great discussions. I want to get to the remaining of the agenda
Yes,
items. Maybe we
Jim,
should.
before we get to the remaining, should we do some follow-up? I think there are two things we want to follow up, right? One is the snapshot API interface.
Right.
The other is conversational here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we should actually continue that. Yes, so let's sync up offline, and maybe we could do follow up in the next meeting.
For that discussion, Dave, could you bring your, could you present what you have right now for the CRs that you were thinking of? I'd love to dig into those.
Yeah, I really want to get to the point where I can show you that stuff. It's almost there. So soon.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let me just share the. Okay, so we basically just want to look at the white paper and see how we are doing. Oh, there's such an open issue here. So white paper, I think I see Fang says he hasn't got time to update that yet. Tom, do you have any update about this, or are you still waiting for people to give feedback?
No update. I think the last thing we talked about was Stephen actually had put together, I think a lot of things that would go in the section. So I think the next step here is probably organizing things a bit and figuring out what we want to pull out from his section and put it in here. Or if we want to extend this at all, I can write some text for this as well.
Oh, so he added in this doc. I can take a look if it's already added there.
No, so Stephen maybe like a month and a half ago presented a section that had there's a lot of detail there.
That's use cases, right?
It was use cases, but I think there was a lot of discussion of motivation that included hook information.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Do you want me to take a pass through it and see if I can rationalize?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking we could even shuffle some of your section to this one if it made sense as well.
Yeah, that's what I meant by rationalize, so that it's not duplicative and yeah, because you're right. I sort of wrote mine totally not understanding what else was around it, so it might make sense.
That'd be great. Thank you.
No worries.
We'll add this action item for you then. Thank you. All right. So Fang, you basically just need to, you're not waiting for anyone else, right? You just need to update it yourself, right? I think last time we.
Yeah, I need to look at it in more detail to see if we can extract an example flow out of the NetApp Snaplit, or I can review the example that we currently have.
Okay.
To illustrate that it can only also used similarly in Snaplit. Another one that I haven't had a chance to look at is how we can do something like Elastic backup to take advantage of the snapshot. I haven't looked at the Elastic yet. So
I think okay. All right, thank you. Okay, I think this is okay. So I think this is Steve. You added this one, right? You
told me to make a note somewhere. I wasn't sure where to put it, so I stuck it there. Feel free to put it anywhere.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, this was mostly just, and it may tie in with the conversation we were having. Again, it's one mechanism that AWS is pushing. So I was just hoping Tom or Dave or someone could also take a look and see what they think of where that's headed.
Okay. Thank you. Right, I think we are at the top of the hour. Yeah, great discussion today. We will have a follow-up discussions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.